Okay, back again with video 2 on character projecting for the second type of character projection. Also, sorry about the loud landscaping sounds in the background. This is the only time I had to do this, and of course that was the only time they chose to do that, so whatever. Moving on. So for type 2, the horizon line does not cross your figures, and to create multiple figures of the same size in different planes at different distances from the camera, you need to project them with perspective. So just like before, start with a picture plane. In this case, we're going to have a horizon line that is high, so our characters can be below it. This works the same way with a horizon line that is very low as well, but a high horizon line is just more common. So we'll do that just for acclimation. Establish some decently far apart vanishing points like you would with any perspective drawing. Sorry, it kind of falls out of the frame, but to have them a good safe distance apart, just so you know this is where they are. just believe me. So to illustrate this principle, I'm going to start with something basic and non-threatening like a box. I'm just going to quickly freehand, well not freehand, it's a perspective lesson after all, I should use the perspective, and make a little box here with these vanishing points for this 2-point perspective I've set up. Okay, so there's our little box. Suppose we wanted this box to be much closer or much further away. We could get it to be the exact same size, but at a different location, closer or further from the camera. And we would use the vanishing points to project it. This is what I mean by projecting, sort of send it forward. Use these again. And this is obviously a bit rough, but you understand the basic principle of that this would be, see, it's too short. I was not very precise with that, but you understand the basic principle that if you want to move things in perspective, you have to use perspective to make that happen. So I'm just going to erase these to keep this space uncluttered. But when in doubt with using figures in perspective, just remember everything can be reduced to a square, which is maybe the easiest thing to understand within the rules of perspective. So when you get overwhelmed, just imagine everything as a square. That can help me get my head around things sometimes. So doing this with a figure, you start with a figure. It's our same little guy here. And from this point, I'm going to just project a bunch of figures, just like I did last time. It's going to be slightly different. So very similar to with the box. You just take the character's height, project it way out. I'm going to project this all the way because we're going to put a bunch of figures in there. And you can populate this whole space as much as you like. I find it's helpful to sort of do my vertical to help me establish just how much space this character is going to take up as I go. Same thing you can do in the other direction. Any of these characters I could project. There could be a guy here. Be the same height as this guy, who's the same height as all these other guys. Same thing with any point along here. You can project any character anywhere from any starting point. And again, those guys are all the same height. I love that. It's so cool. So this may seem like a more limited approach than type 1. It may seem like you can't just put a figure anywhere you want, like we were doing up in here. But in actuality, you totally can. And what the projection is going to tell you is what size that person will be based on where you've chosen to put them. So I'm going to say, I'm just going to pick a spot where I want a character to be. Let's say I want a character's head over here. So I'm going to figure out, based on what I already have here, how tall that character is if their head is there. So let's see, do I connect to that? Oh, look at that, that's too convenient. It lines up with that. Again, like in the first one, if you're moving parallel to the horizon line, the height is not going to change. So we're going to use that, put that over there. And there we have it, a character of the same height exactly where I wanted him to be. Now let's do something a little harder. Let's say I want a character's head here. Let's see, how am I going to figure this out? So let's see, we have some established heights here. So just going to build that from there. Oh, this is going to fall off the page, this might be sloppy. So let's see. So if the character were back here, this would be his head size. There he goes there. Oh, this is going to be very extreme. So, yeah, way off the page, which often happens in most drawings. So it's not that weird, but again, I was able to choose a spot, and perspective told me exactly what size that character would be based on where I wanted to put them. And as you saw here, I wanted to emphasize this, but you know what, let me do one more time. Let me send a row of characters back this way. Again, the parallels are also very useful because I can just do this. And as long as they're standing in this line, I can have infinite characters of the same height here as well. And I can project any of these also. Like, the possibilities are endless. I could send this guy out to here. And let's say like this. And he'd be there, which is basically in that row, but whatever. You get what I'm saying. And again, these characters are all the same height. How cool is that? Oh, and also, you're not limited to doing this with the full figure. You can do this with just one body type. So you have a close shot, and you really just have the head, or the head and shoulders. Like, you don't have enough space to throw in the entire body. Let's say you have a character here who's this large. You have his head, and you want one further forward. You can project him. I would just say with heads, just be careful to use the center line. Like you saw me using the center line of the figure down here. Heads are a slightly more versatile shape, so just be using the center line on that. Same thing there. So a character that much further forward would be that much larger. And back this way, he would be that size. And way back here, he would be that size. Again, all those characters are the same size. So as you'll see on the Loomis page, flash that real quick. Andrew Loomis talks about this as well. This method of character projecting is not limited to the second type. You can do this in the first method of character projecting as well. I just tend not to do it because I find it easier to just build a figure around where the horizon line crosses them. But saying we have our vanishing point there, you can do the same thing. And they will still be the same height. I just find it redundant because if the line is crossing them, you can see they're in the same place they would be if you just placed them on the horizon line. But that can be useful if you have to use both at once. Like if there were a character that were so short, like if you say you had like a cat, for example, who is below the horizon line, like in type 2, then you have to sort of combine them. And then you can project, depending on what type of perspective you're using, if it's 1, 2, or 3 point, you can project your cat just like we were projecting the figures down in type 2. So let's say I want him to be not behind that guy. We can move him parallel. And this is the space your cat fits in if he's that much closer. So there you go. Based on this lesson, I'd like to see 3 scenes like these. And they all need to have people in them, obviously, which has been the point of the lesson. That was an unnecessary note. Scene 1 is type 1, the horizon line intersecting with the characters. Numerous standing clones, which means they are just all the same heights as each other, projected to interesting places across your picture plane. Let's see numerous sitting clones of appropriate size, and numerous noticeably shorter clones, like the cat or the kid. If these short characters are too short to interact with the horizon line, that's just fine. We just talked about that, so that should be no problem. It's just type 2 method. You just use type 2 method to project them, just like we did down in here. I would like to see at least one figure on a different plane of elevation. So like this guy, someone either standing up higher for some reason, hovering in midair, I don't even care, like there doesn't have to be logic in it, or drops down below the ground level somehow. For the second scene, do basically the same thing again. It's still type 1, but choose a very different place for the horizon line. So much higher or much lower on the body. You may be surprised how different it feels, even though all the rules still apply. For the third scene, let's try type 2, the horizon line not intersecting with the characters. Basically do the same thing as the first two scenes with the same cast of characters, the same like tall guys, short guys, sitting guys, very short guys, try different things, but use the projection method. Multiple sizes, multiple figures, etc. After this lesson, we will move into building full scenes by using perspective, but for now, spend some time with this. It may be tricky at first, so be patient with yourself, but as you learn it, I think you'll probably begin to find it very empowering. I love perspective, even though it's still hard sometimes, because it is objectively hard. Don't feel bad. This is an objectively hard thing to get and practice. But the good thing about it is that if you're using it right, it is impossible to make mistakes. Like that's such magic to me. There's no guesswork in drawing a scene if you know how to use perspective. I think I said before, maybe back in our first lesson, perspective is the math of drawing. So it can seem like kind of a bummer at first, but it is absolutely indispensable to a good finished product. It is the one actual magical ingredient you need for any good drawing. So go give it a shot and let's see what you can do.